This is NorthPod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Stevenson with his own move. Carrington. North are in front.
Hello and welcome back once again to NorthPod. It's me, Jason Hunt, once again. And what a big week it has been in football, particularly for North Melbourne. Plenty of things for us to talk about this week. We had Tyler Sellers signing on. We've had Tarryn Thomas being suspended, sacked, off the list now. We've had our match simulation or practice match against the Pies win. So, yeah, given it's off-season, there's plenty of things for us to talk about. We'll touch on all of those things in this episode. So stick around, tune into the end, as they say, for some fantastic thoughts. I'll jump right into housekeeping. And as always, if you're interested in a shout out on the podcast, you can either leave a review on Apple or you can buy me a coffee. It's a service where you can send me money. But yeah, it's just a way to support the show. So thank you to Zach, who bought me some coffees this week. I promise to spend that money on some Coke. And if anyone else is interested, you can find the links for that in the show notes. Let's jump right into the episode. I'm going to treat this more or less like a regular season game in that I'm going to review it the same way. Similar kind of structure. We'll go through the game, then we'll look at the other news. So if you're hanging out for the Tarryn Thomas or the Tyler Sellers chat, we'll get there at the end in the news section. But let's look at the match result. We won the game 102-68. So yeah, quite an uplifting kind of result. I know, we'll put all the caveats on it. We'll go through that, but a win is a win in terms of morale, and you're obviously doing some of the right things if you win. So yeah, we won 102-68. There was also two kind of situation sims that they did at the end of quarter 2 and quarter 4 that didn't count towards that score, and we won both of those. So the way that it worked was at the end of quarter 2, we were ahead, so they just essentially for 5 minutes set up a situation where North Melbourne's 7 points ahead and they have to hold on to that lead, which we were able to. And then at the end of quarter 4, they just flipped it. So again, it was just pretend Collingwood's 7 points up and they have to hold on to that lead. And again, we were able to overpower them. We nearly ran out of time. It was, I think, maybe 4 goals. There was several goals at least in that time period. But Coleman Jones was able to slot one late, so we won that too. So it was win-win-win for North Melbourne, which is great. Plenty of players missing on both sides, but I think you would have to say the Pies were missing more than us, but they've got more talent than us to be missing, to be fair. They're the premiers. So, yeah, they definitely rested a few more. They do play a week earlier than North Melbourne does. So you would think that they're timing their loads correctly so they don't overdo it. But, yeah, we were certainly missing a few as well. We didn't have a full contingent either through injury or really just loading. So yeah, all the caveats on that, but we've won. And we certainly did not do much of that last year. Last week, I sort of joked that we beat ourselves. At least this is, an opposition. And, I think we don't want to get excited, but it's certainly promising in terms of the way that we were able to play and the sorts of things that we saw in certain situations. So, yep. Collingwood definitely were trying a few different things out and they mixed and matched the players just like we were. So we do not want to get ahead of ourselves. And certainly, if they say that premierships aren't won in July, they certainly are not won in February. But some really promising signs from that game. In terms of story of the game, which is how I like to start the podcast proper. We have to say it, NorthBall, which George Wardlaw kind of half-jokingly talked about. It's just a way to describe the game plan, really. It's takeoff of Bazball for those cricket fans, which, is after Brendan McCullum. Look, it's a long story. Essentially, NorthBall is just saying that we're playing exciting footy, and it's exciting footy. I am a bit of a boring Ben. I don't mind negative defensive football if it means you win. But obviously, if we're able to play an attacking game style and be entertaining and also win, I'm all for that. So, yeah, that game plan was fully on show. It's move the ball forward at all costs. It's run forward as soon as you dispose of it. And we saw that, pretty much if you're kicking it from anywhere or even disposing it, handballing it. If you're disposing of the ball anywhere between fullback and half forward, the moment you dispose of it, they're just running forward in waves to try and impact the next contest or get a 1-2 on the way through. They're running in waves and in groups up the field. There's a lot of long kicks down the middle, particularly once we sort of got to that 70 metres or so area out from our defensive goal. We were more than happy to boot it long to half forward and try and, get the ball there really quickly. We also were biting off some of those 45 degree sort of 30 metre kicks. But yeah, I'd say our two modes of getting it quickly into the forward line were those really long kicks or just running in handball and linking up and trying to, with those quick skills, beat the next defensive player. So, we're going to have to live with some mistakes because that does come with risks. And we saw that in the first quarter that we really got cut up on turnover. And, I mean, look, we're North Melbourne. We're used to seeing that the past several years. We have been turnover specialists and we have been scored heavily against as a result of that. So, part of me goes, I don't know that it's a massive problem because we did that anyway. Even when we weren't trying to play super aggressively, our skills weren't ideal. So, yeah, it's really clear what we're trying to do. You can see that we're going to probably score more freely, but also potentially are going to leak goals at the same rate or even more than we did last year. The defence we know is very inexperienced, so it's going to be tough to expect them to win too many one-on-one contests. But yeah, I mean, based on what we saw in the match on Wednesday, there's plenty to like about the way that we're going to play. When it comes off, it really gives our forwards so many just even chance contests, and often they're one-on-ones, but even if it's not one-on-ones, it's 2v2s or 3v3s. It just doesn't allow, or in this case Collingwood, but our opposition to flood back and zone up and then outnumber us in our forward line. And yeah, you can see Larkey loved it. Paul Curtis was loving it. And whilst they didn't have super, high scoring games like they did in the match, the intra-club, I thought Stevo and Zerha were still pretty lively. Blake Drury and Cooper Harvey were okay. So Robert Hansen kicked a goal. All of those players were able to get involved in it as a result of that fast ball movement. And I think it's also why, when we look at the goal kickers, which I will talk about in a minute, they're primarily forward line players. We really didn't get a lot from the midfield in terms of scoring. It was all the forwards. I've got it pulled up here. So Larkey 5, Curtis 3, Stevenson 2, Drury 1, Hansen Jr. 1, Harvey 1, and Zerha 1. The only midfielder or non-forward there that kicked a goal was Dylan Stevens, who kicked 1. Everyone else is a forward half player, which is quite rare for us. We had a lot of... it's quite rare in general, I would say. Generally, you can expect to have a few goals through the midfield, but really it was just the forward line players, and that's as a result of the ball getting there so fast. And obviously the forwards are there. There wasn't the opportunity we weren't having stoppages in our forward line necessarily and then scoring from that, because that's often where you'll see midfielders kick them, or if they're really bursting from a stoppage, say, 70 metres out, or there's some fast overlap handball. There would have been opportunities to do that where we missed, but yeah, it was just really forward line scoring heavy. I think this new game plan is going to mean that our forwards are going to be able to kick more goals as opposed to our defenders in our midfield, and that can only be a good thing, I would say. Yeah, that probably does it for the story of the game. Just loving that game plan. It's so aggressive and it's super exciting to watch. The next phase or part of the podcast is where I will do the 5 stars of the game. This is something that I introduced or I adapted from what I introduced halfway through last year. And these votes aren't going to count, but essentially it's going to be the top 4 North Melbourne players in order and then who I thought was the best or one of the most impactful opposition players. So normally it'll be a 4-3-2-1 voting situation. However, because it's only a practice match, obviously this is not going to count for the yearly tally. So yeah, if it was, like Sheasel's getting the 4 votes and it's not super close. He had 42 disposals. Most of them were effective. He just didn't stop all day. He was everywhere. Unlike the intra-club, he did play some time in midfield, but certainly spent more time off half-back and just chaining up through the middle. You could probably find a way to link him to nearly every scoring chain we had. He was just in everything. And sure, there were plenty of times where he got a 1-2 and had 2 or 3 disposals per chain, but just so classy. Didn't really make many mistakes. I can think of one time that he had a disposal smothered and that was about it. Nick Dacos played only for the first half and Sheasel definitely out-Dacosed him during that time. I think Dacos had something like 15 or 14 touches for his half a footy, which, is still very good, but Sheasel had 42 and yeah, he was everywhere. So he was definitely best on from my perspective. Larky would have got the 3 votes. He kicked 5 goals. He probably would have been closer to the 4 if he'd kicked a couple more because he did miss a few that maybe he wouldn't ordinarily. It was a bit uncharacteristic of him, but boy, is he in some good form. He was marking it well. He looked dangerous when the ball hit the ground. He also got up the ground a fair bit, took a couple of great marks, and like he did last year, he just draws those free kicks because the opposition are either out of position or they're a bit nervous. He is in some ripping form leading into the year. He's really carried that form that he had at the end of last year into this year. And it looks like he could kick 70 again, to be honest. I was, preparing myself for the reality that, he might kick a few less this year. It might be a bit more spread out, but he's just such a target. We know that we need to find someone next to him to be that other focal point. But yeah, as I said, he probably should have kicked 6 or 7 today. We'll certainly take the 5, and he's looking fantastic. The 2 votes I'll give to Tristan Xerri, and he deserves it. He's copped so much flack mostly from fans over the past couple of years, and I think what we're seeing is, what he can do when he's unencumbered by injury and he gets a bit of a run at it. Now again, in the intra-club, he was only rucking against Finbar. Today, he had a combination of Mason Cox and the other Collingwood ruckman who, his name escapes me right now. So, competition, he wasn't playing Max Gawn or, an absolutely elite ruckman, but I thought he was borderline fantastic. He was probably a step down from that, but he rucked pretty much all the game. There was a couple of contests where CCJ went in instead. He was marking all around the ground. I thought that his hit-outs were mostly to our advantage. He dominated when he was in there. And he was a big part of why we dominated the clearances after the first quarter, because he was able to hit it to our advantage. He was clunking them better than I've seen him do, in an AFL match, I thought. And it wasn't just chip kicks. He took a couple of contested grabs. He's in super good form coming into the year as well. So hopefully we can see him translate this into a proper AFL game. But to see him do against proper AFL opposition is the first step. To be honest, he was in that last quarter, he was behaving like a Harlem Globetrotter. There was a moment in the last minute or so where he took the ball. I can't remember if it was from a ruck contest or if it was a loose ball, and he handballed it over his head backwards. And the handball receiver did not break step. It was a real show-off manoeuvre. I'm here for it because of the fact that it was a pracky game. I don't know how I'd feel about him trying that in a real game, but it just shows, I think, how confident he's feeling right now. So yeah, keep that helmet on, mate. It's working wonders. It will be interesting to see if that's going to be a long-term thing or if it is just while his cheek is recovering, because we know he had that, I think it was a fractured eye socket or cheekbone. So that's why he's wearing it. But yeah, he looks in ripper form, and I think that is super important because our next best ruckman is, I don't know. Yeah, that situation is a problem, and I will talk about what I saw from CCJ a little bit later. And the one vote was a tricky one. I thought Paul Curtis was a chance for this, Callan Dawson was a chance, Tom Powell was a chance, but I really thought Dylan Stephens deserved the one vote. He didn't super impress me in the intra-club last week. He kicked 2 goals and had a couple of useful possessions, but other than that, he was pretty quiet last week. But I thought on Wednesday he really dominated on his wing. He used his penetrating left foot kick and was a consistent option all day, just ran backwards and forwards all day, which, is his job on that wing. Chipped in with a goal and was, he just really impressed me. I thought this is probably what we were hoping that we could get from him when we brought him across. I don't think we're anticipating that he's going to become an All-Australian wingman, although I'd love it if he could. But I think that we're looking for him to become a reliable player that's going to get you 20 to 25 most weeks, kick, a goal every other game, and just run up and down and be that option. And that's what he was able to do. So, yeah, I'd go Sheasel 4, Larky 3, Cherry 2, and Stevens 1 from this game. And then I think the 5th star, the best opposition player, certainly in terms of when he was on the field, was Jordan De Goey. We know what he's like in the middle. We kind of hope that Zerha could one day become like that. I don't think he's got that midfield nous to him, but yeah, he was explosive out of the middle, just looked a class above when he was in there. Bobby Hill also had a fantastic start to the game, but yeah, with Hill and De Goey, they were the main reasons that the Pies got out to that strong lead in the first quarter, which eventually we pegged back and really just torched them after that. But De Goey was, he was also in fantastic form. And I think it's probably something to watch with our offensively minded mids. We don't, at the moment, have a super lockdown or a tagger in our midfield. So, that is where I wonder if a Curtis Taylor might play as a lockdown if there's a particularly dangerous midfielder for the opposition. Look, that's all, I'm not saying that I'm into that. I think that's maybe an option. But, the fact that De Goey was able to be so dominant when he did play, because I'm fairly sure he only played the first half, is probably just something to keep an eye on in terms of how well our midfielders are defending. And that goes for all of them, really. I don't think any of them deserve absolute license to only think offensively. I think you've got to be a pretty special offensive player to have that. Like LDU would be the closest, and I think probably with Wardlaw you don't want to take away from his offensive mindset, because he is also such a great tackler, and he does pressure. It's just whether or not he gets himself into the right positions on turnover and that kind of thing. But anyway, I'm going down a different rabbit hole there. I thought De Goey, when he played, was the best opposition player, and as I said, there were lots of Collingwood players missing. So I did have that list up here. So they were missing players like Pendlebury, Sidebottom, Howe, Crisp, Mitchell, Maynard, Elliott, Moore, Myercheck, Murphy, McStay. So they had plenty missing that would have obviously made this a much more competitive long-term match, but they still had plenty of talent in there. Lipinski, Quaynor, De Goey, both the Dacosses. Lockie Schultz played his first competitive game for Collingwood. So yeah, super, super dangerous De Goey, and he was the one that in that first quarter was bursting away from the centre clearance and giving his forwards the first option. And that's certainly who the commentary team was getting excited about from a Collingwood perspective. So after that, we transition into the negatives and the positives, the good and the bad. I tend to like to start with the negatives, and that is where we're going to start today. So, Bobby Hill. Bobby Hill was a problem, and particularly early. I don't think his dangerousness and his output was consistent across the entire game, but early on he kicked a goal, he looked really dangerous, and we didn't seem to have a matchup that could go with him. I know Zach Fisher was around him a bit in the first quarter. I saw Josh Goder on him later on. I don't think we had one player that was designated for him, but he was a real challenge to wrangle. And look, we know that this is an area of weakness for us. Opposition small forwards have torched us the past couple of years. Toby Green, Cody Waitman, they both come to mind. Charlie Cameron. So, those types of players are an issue. They're the sort of player that I think we are most vulnerable to coming into this year. Probably them, and if it was an absolute hulking, like a Tom Hawkins, probably I'm not sure how we handle a player like him. Anyway, so we didn't really have a player that was super allocated to him. I think that's probably what we're going to have to figure out, like with these mediums and smalls, who is going to be allocated, or is it going to be a team responsibility? I think when you've got a super dangerous small forward opposition, I do think you're better off having someone whose job it is as opposed to a shared responsibility. I just think it's really hard to keep an eye on someone like Toby Green as a team. So whether it's Fisher or McKercher or Sheasel or Goda or Bergman or Lukey Mack when he comes back, it's a nice little rhyme for you. I don't really know yet who I prefer / who they're teeing up as the person that could do it, but I do think we need one or two of them to add a real defensive capability so that we can use that when appropriate. So particularly if it was Fisher or McKercher or Sheasel, we don't want to take them away from what they do well. But potentially one of them, and maybe it is Fisher, needs to just have that mode that they're able to switch into where they're a defense first kind of player, if depending on the opposition. Maybe when Luke McDonald comes back, that's his role, but I don't necessarily think. I don't have a lot of trust in that based on the last couple of years. He's just seemed to be a bit too slow and to lack the skills and agility to do that. But, I'd be up for giving him a chance at that this year with the new look set up. Potentially that's a role that Jackson Archer could play when he's fit. Goda and Bergman, whilst they're more medium-sized, like high 180s, low 190s, they're potentially athletic enough to do it. So, look, we'll see. But Bobby Hill just told us, what we've already known, that it's a problem. The second negative I thought was the handballing forwards. It does come with significant risk. So a big part of when we were transitioning the ball is that the handballing forwards and then trying to link up and sort of weave our way through the traffic. And when it works, it looks fantastic. It looks silky. You just cut up the opposition. But it does rely on good decision-making and quick decision-making at that, and also just good skills, like sharp, none of this high handballs or kicks that float in the air. It really requires darts and handballs out in front and players not having to break step. So none of those things are things that we've been accused of having in recent years. We have been sloppy, we've been bad at making decisions, and all I think of when I think about that is Luke McDonald just grabbing the ball and not even pretending to get rid of it and getting caught holding the ball once or twice a game last year. That's what comes to mind and what worries me about this forward handballing game that we've got going on at the moment. I am happy to give him the benefit of the doubt that he can fit into this new outfit. But yeah, it only came unstuck a couple of times for us today. But yeah, come the season proper, when there's, the pressure goes up and we're playing for keeps, I do worry about what might happen. It's a bit of a concern. Yeah, it's just something to keep an eye on, because if you're kicking it, at least when you kick it 40 metres and you turn it over, you've got some time, but depending on how it's turned over, you might not have much time, but you've got a bit of a time to adjust and try and, set up defensively. Sorry, I'm just frogging my throat there. I think it's croaked its way out. But when you turn it over with these forward handballs, it often means that the opposition players got it. They're facing forwards. They're already moving, and they're ready to kick it inside 50. It just gives you no time to set up. So they can be killer turnovers, particularly if they happen in the back half, which is where we're trying to start these chains. So it's just something to keep an eye on how well that forward handballing happy kind of movement translates to the proper season. As I said, I'm happy to give it a chance to do so, but I am a bit nervous about that. And final negative, I am trying to be a bit shorter and sharp with the positives and negatives this year. I just thought some of our tools were found out today, which is honestly okay. We've got plenty back half to experiment with. I thought Biggie Newen was pretty fumbly and error prone today. Probably a little more so than he was in the match sim intra club. I thought he was okay in that. I thought he was pretty poor in this week's game against the Pies. I can't see him making the round one side based on this, particularly if Aiden Core is fit. I don't really know if Core could come back without having played a practice match. Like, we'll see if he gets up for the game against St Kilda, but it might be that you want him to get a bit of match fitness given he's missed a fair chunk of the preseason. Anyway, that's by the by. I thought, yeah, Biggie, he's definitely got athletically the ability to be a good player, and he took a few good intercept marks. So he can find himself in the right spots, but his skills and his decision making let him down at times. He got caught holding the ball, trying to take Nick Dacos on when it just wasn't on there, off in the half back line. Yeah, he was a bit clumsy and sloppy at times when trying to pick the ball up. So yeah, look, I didn't think he was great. It wasn't a good game for him. And at the other end of the ground, I thought CCJ had another stinker, to be honest, which sucks. He, as I said, he did kick that late goal, which, won us that section of the game. But aside from that, I don't think he really impacted the game. I can think of maybe one other positive output. I think he had a nice hand pass to someone running past, and they scored. I just don't think that he was enough of a presence in the forward line, didn't take enough marks or even, contest the ball enough. I didn't like his ruck work at all. I thought he got pushed around like he did at times last year. So, yeah, that position is a worry to me, that second tall forward that can relieve in the ruck. Because sure, like CCJ can go and do it, but I think at this point he's a negative in there rather than a neutral. And he just... didn't do enough in the forward line to excite me or to make me feel like we can rely on him there. So, I think that for me, he'll need to have a good performance in the game against St Kilda next week to secure his spot in the side for round one, which, prior to any of this match simulation, practice match stuff, I personally thought he was a lock just based on the lack of other available talent we have there. But look, if the other areas of the other forwards are firing, I do wonder if you can go with just Larky as an absolute tool, and you play maybe Dersma or Zerha, and then you just hope to God that Cherry can play 90% of the ruck, and you throw a Hugh Greenwood or someone else that's vaguely tall in the ruck when Cherry needs a bit of a chop out. Anyway, we'll probably come to that in the next week or so. We'll see what happens with the St Kilda practice match. But yeah, CCJ is a worry. I really want him to go well, but he has not impressed me so far this preseason. And look, I know that he's had a lot of non-contact time due to his concussions. Maybe that's part of it. He just needs to get that strength and match touch back in his game. But yeah, he is a worry for me. But we won this game. I think I need to reiterate that because it's such a weird feeling to have won a game of football. We did win this game very comfortably. So there were heaps of positives to take out of it. I did obviously talk about some of the positives already in the stars of the game, but I've got a few other, super positives here to talk about. Callan Dawson was probably very unlucky not to be in the votes. He looks like a lock for round one for me. He's strong. He's agile and quick for his size. Yeah, he just looked really assured and made some fantastic plays, particularly in the second half. I thought he was pretty quiet early on, but really grew into the game. And part of being a key defender is that you might not actually have a lot to do offensively, but if you're not being noticed, often that means you're doing your job. And I thought that I didn't really notice him early, and then when I did notice him in the second half, it was because he was doing positive things both offensively and defensively. I really liked in the last quarter, he chased Bobby Hill and nearly matched him for pace. Now, Bobby Hill did, weave and avoid him, but the pressure that Callan Dawson put on there did create a turnover. It went straight to Pink, and we were able to march the ball up the field the other direction. So it's just those little things that made me go, yeah, he's got a future. As I said, he's strong, agile, and I think pretty quick for his size. He's pretty decent kick too, given he's a key defender. And I think it's just, it's great to see that the investment that we've put into him seems to have paid off. It's a real Ben Who, to be honest. It's what was the problem last year? I don't even remember. It does make me wonder, was biding his time in the VFL, like, was it all a plan? And I guess this is where you want to retrospectively think that the club was geniuses. And who knows, maybe they are. But maybe the plan all along was for them to go, look, we've got to play Ben Mackay. We can't not play him. We think that Callan Dawson can replace him next year, but let's just give him all the time in the world in the VFL to get that confidence. We give him a little bit of a taste of it in that last round, and then we throw him in the deep end next year. And look, I have no idea if that's the case, but I'm going to say it is, because he just looks like a great replacement. Now, I'm not saying that this guy is going to be Harry Taylor or he's going to be Robbie Tarrant, but I think he can absolutely be serviceable in defence this year, and that's what we need, given we've got Logue out for half the year, and that's really, that's it in terms of our tall defensive stocks that we can rely on. We've got plenty of options, it's just we're not sure who we can rely on yet. We didn't see, obviously, Core or Combin today, so hopefully we do get to see one or both of them next week against the Saints. I thought Toby Pink also had a serviceable game down back. He was pretty good, positioned himself well, didn't really make too many mistakes. As I said, I thought Biggie was disappointing, but the rest of the defence was quite promising. So, yeah, Callan Dawson, fantastic. I think lock him in for round one. Core's a lock if he's fit. And then it's just, is it Combin? Is it Pink? I don't think it's Biggie Newen. We'll have to figure out who else slots in there as the tall defenders. The second positive, the midfield mix, it looked quite balanced to me, and I think that's whatever group we go with. All of Wardlaw, Simpkin, LDU, Phillips, Powell, Lazaro look like they can play with each other and in different kind of combinations. We saw the last 5 minutes where they were simulating North Melbourne having to come from behind. We just played Cherry as the ruck with Wilfield, Lazaro and Powell at his feet that whole time. And it was almost a bit of a who wants a spot for round one kind of competition, because they'd be the three, most on the outer, so to speak. And I spoke on last week's podcast about the fact that I feel that Phillips is probably, the closest to a lock out of those three. Powell really put his hand up today. He had a fantastic game. I think it was 32 touches, something like that. Lazaro was also pretty good. I thought Powell was the best of the three, and then Phillips and Lazaro probably split the points for second. It was hard to differentiate them. Phillips only played the second half, but I thought played a fantastic second half. I think it was Wardlaw that he swapped with. Wardlaw wasn't, Wardlaw did what he does. He's not going to be a massive 40 possession type player, I don't think, but when he's around the ball, stuff happens. And sometimes it's just chaos. I think early days I thought that he was going to be another Cunnington, but he's a bit different. He's very different in that he's got that real explosiveness and chaos and just absolute want to get the football about him. Anyway, I digress. I think the midfield mix looks exciting. Cherry's in form, which is exciting. Just the general chemistry and understanding of what each other's going to do offensively looks like it's improved heaps from last season, which is exactly what we want. Jai Simpkin playing half forward and pushing into the midfield looks dangerous. In particular. And I think, just to reiterate what's happening there, he was having some centre bounce attendances, he was playing some legit midfield time, but when he wasn't, he was playing high half forward, and such a high half forward that essentially once the ball bounced, he was another midfielder. And it just allows him to, put his halfback or whoever's opposing him in some positions that they might be less comfortable. It gives us more around the footy. Or, obviously, if that defender decides they want to slack off and play loose, we've got an extra around the ball. So it forces that defender into a decision. And we know that Jai Simpkins fantastic in tight quarters. He's got a great step on him. I thought he had a solid game today. So yeah, the midfield mix looks great. I think probably one of that lot is going to miss out. I don't think you can take 6 out and out midfielders in. Maybe you can, depending on what the rest of your makeup looks like. Or if you think that Simpkins going to play mostly forward, then maybe you can. But yeah, regardless, that is a core group of midfielders that are out and out midfielders. I think, as I said, the chemistry is looking fantastic. Another positive, I can't believe I've got however long we're into this podcast, or we're nearly around 35 minutes. Colby McKercher probably deserves a bit more credit. I think just because of what we saw Harry Sheezel do last year, there's an element of McKercher sort of flying under the radar for me. But really, he's doing exactly what Sheezel did, which is phenomenal. He just has all the time that he wants. He doesn't make mistakes. He's that classy disposal. I just think he does such a good job, and it means that Fisher and Sheezel, the three of them, if one of them's not having a great game, at least they've got each other's back. I also think that if McKercher and Fisher are playing primarily as distributors, it gives Sheezel a chance to play a bit freer and a bit higher up the ground. It allows us to push him into the midfield or forward if we want to. Whereas last year, you were robbing Peter to pay Paul, because we really needed Sheezel behind the ball to get the ball past halfway, and we were only able to put him further up the ground in those games where we were playing well, or we needed something. Like I think of the Fremantle game. I think of the West Coast game, in the second half of the year. I think of the Sydney game where we were right in it and we put him in there to try and win us the game. And he wasn't able to either time, unfortunately, but he went really close. And anyway, I say all of that because I thought McKercher had a fantastic game, and I just can't wait to see what his growth might look like across the year, because he is playing some phenomenal football for an 18, 19-year-old. And I think, playing him off halfback and potentially, maybe off the wing at times is going to be fantastic for his development for this year. And then finally, this is probably a bit more of a offhand kind of comment, but I just think it's exciting that we've now played 2 practice matches essentially, and there's still more for us to experiment with in terms of players that are either injured or have been a little bit touch and go. Like McDonald and Core haven't had a look in. Bailey Scott hasn't played in the last 2. Darcy Tucker's barely played in the last 2. Ford didn't play today. Still a bit injured. Dersma didn't play today. Comber didn't play today. Greenwood. Sorry, I'm back to that saying today. I'm so used to recording a podcast straight after a game, despite having watched this game a couple of days ago. But they didn't play on Wednesday. So look, it's all with a grain of salt, but I think it's nice to be optimistic about the fact that we have so many of these options still to experiment with. So hopefully we are able to get a few of those players on the park for our next game, so we can get a full look at what it could look like and make a really informed decision for round 1. But I think overall a really positive result. And I think I probably didn't even, give you enough about the fact that we won this game. Like, we went down, I don't know, by 3 or 4 goals early, and then just dominated it to the point where we won by, 34 points. And it didn't at any point after, I don't know, half time look like we were in strife at all. It was a really dominant performance, again, in a preseason game where there was lots of players out. So it's obviously North Melbourne's probably going to win the next 25 games in a row and win the flag. I think that's the only logical thing that we could think based on that. But a fantastic positive start to the season, which is just what we need after what I'm going to talk about in a couple of minutes. So the probably two big news pieces from the week. I'll start with the easy one. Tyler Sellers, I'm sure most of you would have seen, has been signed in the supplementary period. So, he's on the list now. He is a VFL player. He's 21 years old, 193 centimetre key forward. Kicked 30-odd goals in the VFL last year, and I don't think I mentioned he's in the North Melbourne VFL side. There had been a lot of talk from the Twitterverse that he needs to be on the list. I know Dean from #Kangaroos has been a big proponent of getting him on the list. So it's fantastic to see. You love these kind of stories where a bloke toils away and gets a chance a little bit later on. So I really hope that he's able to produce. I think just looking at it from a logical perspective, it's great to bolster the depth in that key forward position because we know it's an area of weakness for us. We don't have depth there. I don't know that this signing really moves the needle for us either way, but it certainly doesn't hurt to have another option there. At 193 centimetres, I'm not sure if he's capable of playing backup ruck. We know that CCJ, obviously, his height allows him to do that. It's kind of borderline. It's a very similar height to Greenwood, but Greenwood is certainly more athletic and able to, impact the game more when the ball hits the ground. So that's kind of why Greenwood's a bit more appealing as that second ruck. But look, with Coleman Jones's form, Sellers has every chance to get a game early on in the year because CCJ is just so out of form. We know that tall players take a little bit longer. Tyler Sellers kind of fits into the border of that category at 193. He's a smaller tall player, if that makes sense. So you never know. Maybe he really comes on and develops and becomes a serviceable AFL player. We've seen it before with this type of player picked up either in the mid-season draft or just, as a free agent, so to speak. You just never know. So plenty of opportunity for him to grow into a player that could be either depth or a good role player for us. He's a great mark, a little wayward at times in front of goal, but his chemistry with Larkey in that intra-club last week was pretty solid. So, as I said, I would not be surprised if he got a chance, depending on what kind of form Coleman Jones starts the year with. It would just... my worry is that if you play him over CCJ, I'm not sure who's playing second ruck. Anyway, that's a problem for another day. But, congratulations to Sellers. I'm sure he'd be super pumped because regardless, let's say he stays on the AFL list all year and doesn't play a game. It's he's still an AFL player and he's playing VFL like he would have been anyway. So good on you, Tyler Sellers. Looking forward to seeing what you can bring. And final news piece and really final major talking point for the podcast. It's unavoidable, Tarryn Thomas. So I'm sure everyone would have heard this news if you're a North Melbourne fan by this point. I feel like even people that aren't fans of football, this has probably come across their desk. Found guilty by the AFL Integrity Unit of sending threatening messages to a woman, and has received an 18-week ban from the Integrity Unit, and then he's been sacked by the club. So he's not going to play for North Melbourne again. I'm fairly certain those explicit words were used either by Jen or by someone senior at North Melbourne, because there was several different bits of communication sent out on the day that it happened. I guess I'll just start from looking at it from a human perspective. It's shocking for this woman and for the other people in Tarryn's life that he's damaged or that he's hurt, that he has threatened. So I think it's really important just to acknowledge that is actually the most prevalent or the most important thing to think about, is the people that are impacted directly by his behaviour. And I think we know it's a societal problem, domestic violence and domestic abuse. It's not specific to the AFL system, but when it does happen and it involves AFL players, I think it's important that, as an organisation, the AFL and the clubs involved take a stance. So I think it's a real shame, and it's really sad for the people around Tarryn that it's come to this, but it absolutely had to happen. From a football perspective, it is an absolute waste of talent. He's had so many chances to get things right, but he just couldn't. I would say he's, if not the most, he's the second most, or was the second most talented player, just from a raw talent perspective on our list. You could argue maybe LDU or Sheasel have him covered, but I think he just had so much untapped potential and unfortunately just could not make good decisions, couldn't be a nice person, and was a long way from that based on the evidence that's come out, which, is just such a shame. It would be interesting to know to what extent the players kind of support him now or like him or feel for him. It's such a tricky one because he's made mistake after mistake and has made life for the club really challenging. But at the same time, when you spend so much time with someone, like you inevitably would build up a rapport and a relationship with him. So it would be interesting to know to what extent this is impacting the players, or if this is a real fantastic, we've gotten rid of that distraction and now we can move on. I don't know. I'm not going to try to guess, but it's just something I thought about. I think, the club tried their best. We really probably tried a little bit too much with him. It was a super easy decision to make given, the allegations, which the integrity unit has said were true, or they found him guilty of those allegations. So I don't think the club can be accused of not supporting him or not giving him a chance. I think if anything, it was probably too lenient. And my gut told me that last year, but you also want to believe that there's a chance that he can turn it around, and you want to believe that the club supports their people. So I'm not going to sit here and say that I predicted this, because I didn't, and you would never wish this, but at the same time you sort of go, there's definitely, we could definitely see this coming in some ways, unfortunately. So hopefully from a North Melbourne perspective, this is the beginning of the end of Tarryn Thomas. I don't think it's the end. There's still definitely some things to work out in terms of, to what extent we have to pay him. Is he officially off the list, off the books, or is it we have to wait till the end of the year to have his name off? Like, could we replace him this year with someone else in the mid-season draft? Like, these things still need to be worked through, but he's certainly not going to play for us again. And whilst it is a shame, I'm proud's probably the wrong word, but I feel really confident that the club's made the right decision. And it is a shame because he had so much football talent, and we saw that at the end of last year when he came back. He can play. So you do wonder if another club might give him a chance later on. I sort of think that societally, with the way that how seriously we take domestic violence, I don't see it as super likely, and I think that's probably for the best. But look, you never know. Stranger things have happened. Maybe a club thinks that he's turned it around and he can come back and be a bit more mature. But anyway, that's not for us to worry about. The only other thing that I found interesting, surprising, strange is that the woman approached the AFL as opposed to the police. And I don't say that with any judgment at all. I just wonder, like, why? So was it that she felt that it might be dealt with faster? Was there some kind of existing relationship? Because, and when I say that, like, maybe as part of dealing with Tarryn Thomas, she's had workings with the AFL. Look, I don't know. And it doesn't matter, ultimately. It is a strange thing to me because obviously the integrity unit is not set up to be the police. That's what we have the police for. So just a strange one. Doesn't change anything because they've obviously investigated it to the extent that they can and believe that he's guilty. I really hope that whoever the woman is gets the support that they need, feels safe, all of those things, because at the end of the day, they are the most important people in this, and the people around Tarryn Thomas are the most important people in this because they are the people that are being impacted by his poor choices. I hope that, he gets some support and he grows up as well, but, he's not front of mind for me like the people around him are. If we shift from that, because I sort of want that to be the last that we talk about him properly, in terms of football, it does leave a bit of a hole in the middle of the ground, and I've got no doubt that someone like Powell or Lazaro will take that up. Are they as talented as him? No, but I think we've seen this preseason that both of them have at least taken a step and maybe feel part of that role. So, yeah, it is. We are going to be down a really strong midfielder, but I think that area of the ground we had some depth in, and if a couple of those players can come on, we'll be okay. Tarryn did have that flexibility to play forward and mid equally dangerously. So, Powell and Lazaro don't necessarily have that, or Phillips, if you want to throw him in there. None of them are as dangerous as forwards as Tarryn was. But as I said earlier, we've got LDU, Wardlaw, Simpkin, Phillips, Powell, Lazaro, who can all play as out-and-out mids. And then we've got players like Greenwood and Shields who are experienced. Tucker, similarly experienced, that we can roll through there if we need. Zerha and Sheasel are going to get some minutes in the midfield. We don't have that absolute dearth that we would have had maybe 3 years ago. We've got talent there. It obviously, it does just leave a bit of a gap there that I think is a great opportunity for someone like Powell or Lazaro to step into. So, yeah, I am glad in a way that we've been able to sort out this Tarryn Thomas situation before the season starts. It can't derail us mid-season, you wouldn't think. Touch wood, please. From that perspective, I think it's a positive, and that's about the only positive you can draw from it. We can move forward, he can move on, and hopefully get the help that he needs. And as I said, the women in his life can also do the same. So that pretty much brings us to an end. Just a couple of closing thoughts, I suppose. The next practice match is Sunday, March 3rd against the Saints. It's at 2:10. And that's as close to a actual match as we'll get. Typically, you still play with a slightly larger bench for those sorts of matches, so we should get a chance to showcase a few more players, but aside from that, it tends to be a regulation game, so I am looking forward to seeing what that looks like, and then we'll have the next weekend off because round 1 is just around the corner, and that'll be round 0 actually. Anyway, we can talk about that. So I'll obviously review that game after that takes place. And yeah, I think that's really all I want to get through. I will put up a Spotify poll for all of those that listen to me on Spotify. Who are you most excited to see grow? And I'll be looking at Kirch, Dersma, Wardlaw, Sheasel. So from that really, really young batch of high draft picks, who are you thinking? Who have you got your eye on in terms of who's going to show some exciting growth this year? I'll see. I might put it up on Instagram and Twitter as well. But anyway, look out for that poll. And I was watching this game thinking which of these players is going to grow the most this year, because we saw what Sheasel was able to do last year, and Wardlaw and Burst as well. And I just can't wait to see who else from that young crop can maybe do the same thing. So yeah, hit me up on social media. As I said, if you want to get involved with the show, I'm at NorthPod Show on pretty much everything. So always down for a chat. I've had heaps of people reaching out lately just to ask a quick question or, share some thoughts with me. And I really appreciate that. I'm always down for a chat with the community. I love the NorthPod community that we've built so far. And I really do appreciate everyone who listens and contributes to the show in some way. We're very close to round 1 now. I'm really excited for what the podcast has in store, or what I've got in store for the podcast, what the podcast has got in store for you, however way you want to look at it. It should be a fantastic year. We know that North Melbourne probably, we're not going to experience the highs of this practice match every week this year, but I do really feel as though we're going to experience plenty of positivity this year with Clarko at the helm full time, and and leading us through the season. So jump on board. Please let any North Melbourne fans in your life know about the podcast if you haven't already. Get the word out there for me. And I will speak to you in about a week's time, give or take. Have a fantastic week and go North. Thanks for listening to another episode of NorthPod. If you give me a rating or review on your podcast service, that would be much appreciated. And please follow me on all social media at NorthPod Show. I'm on X or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and I'm also very active on the North Melbourne subreddit. Hope you'll join me for the next episode.